Guys, I'm teaming up with my good friend, retired Navy SEAL Jocko Willnick for something real special. Jocko started Jocko Fuel when he found out the supplements he was buying for himself and his family were filled with heavy metals and ingredients he was unaware of. He wanted a line of supplements and consumables that had all of the good, effective ingredients and none of the bad. So we made it happen. I got set up with all of the key products, and we want to do the same for you. Jocko Go energy drinks for clean, sustainable energy. Jocko Milk Protein for 30 grams of delicious grass-fed protein, plus a full line of supplements to support mood, focus, hydration, joints, and more. Jocko Fuel supplements are scientifically formulated and made with ingredients that are clinically tested. They are better for you options with no artificial flavors or sweeteners, no added sugar, and no gray area ingredients or banned substances. It's clean fuel with health compromise. And right now, you can get 20% off when you use code Chael at jockofuel.com. Or if it's easier, just click on the link below. Colby versus Garry. How are we going to get there? Will you guys admit that if you had a magic wand, you got to be a matchmaker for a day? Would you admit that that is a fight that you would make? In fact, let me ask it more pointedly. If you had that magic wand, you were a matchmaker, and it wasn't that you could make matches, you had to. You were assigned the job to make one for Ian Garry. Is there any match you'd rather see Ian Garry in than one against Colby Covington? All right, same question, but for Colby. You put him anywhere you want. Do whatever you want. Be realistic, right? My one wish is for more wishes. Nah, be realistic with me. What would you do? Got to find a 170-pounder? You know, it's kind of got to be somebody with the rankings and got a name guy that you could move the needle with. Who are you going to put him with? Is there anybody you'd rather put Colby with than Ian Garry? I think on both those points, if you're being fair and reasonable to the experiment we're doing now, you say, yeah, that's the match that I would make. For sure, that is a match that I would make. Okay, great. Well, how do we get there? What would be the delay in making the match? And I'm asking you to do critical thinking to a degree, because if you're going to manipulate a rule set, you must first fully understand it. And there is a policy been around since back in Joe Silva's time, which is if you won your last fight, your next opponent is going to be somebody that also won their last fight. If you lost your last fight, your next opponent is going to be somebody that also lost their last fight. We're not going to go back two. You could be win-win. They could be loss-win. We're only going to look at that last one. You could have 5 wins and 1 loss. They could have 11 losses straight. Well, we're just going to go to that last one. And I'm sharing that with you because it was more complicated in Joe Silva's time. Joe Silva only was making these matches for a total of 2.5 years when there was a ranking system. Now, the whole rest of the time, Joe had his own rankings. He still had a policy and a system. He had a way that his mind works. And you can't get around that, right? It doesn't matter what computer, including the computer of the human brain. You got to know how the thing's operating. So why is Colby versus Ian Garry not made and done? Why? Okay, great. Glad that you asked. The reason it's not done is the way the computer is looking at that. Is if you're going to take somebody who's on a title course, even title reign trajectory, if you're going to take somebody like that, which is where Ian Garry, with a top 15 ranking, with I don't know what he's at now. He must be top 10 by now with that win over Jeff Neal. But completely undefeated. All W's, no L's. Okay. If you're going to take somebody like that, first off, how are we going to break the policy? It's not a rule, it's a policy. But how are we going to do that and put him against Colby, who lost his last one? Now, we can get around that. I'm just sharing with you statistically, more often than not, it is strongly done the other way. We can get around that. But what would be the problem? What would be the hang-up? What is the glitch the computer's having with how it's spitting this out the other side? Well, if you have a guy that's on the trajectory for a title shot and you put him with somebody who's not, you run a risk of burning your young, highly rated, undefeated up-and-comer. So Gary's willing to do it. He's willing to take that risk. I think that he's very sincere. Colby wants to fight. Colby's willing to take that as a way of steering it back. It's a way of trying to identify. But the computer is running into that same problem of putting them together. Which is, yes, if Gary wins, that is notable. That is great. That is a very easy sell to the public to go into a contendership fight or to be awarded contendership right there on the eve of the victory. But what do we do the other way? How do we explain an up-and-comer that lost to somebody a decade older or somebody who's coming off of a loss when you were perfectly undefeated? It's one of those situations, and there are workarounds, but there's not a whole lot that you can look to in history. There's not many times in this sport that you've got to reinvent the wheel. You just got to be able to look back and identify. For any conflicts, good, bad, or indifferent, you can generally find a situation where it happened, and you can look at what the resolution was. And if that remedy was positive and or negative, you still have a good idea of what to do next time. So that's what the problem is, right? Like if Colby has to overcome something, it's that. Colby's got a higher ranking. So as far as Colby having a loss in his last one and Gary having a win, I mean, those are two tremendously different fights. Can we agree? A 3-round undercard match with Neil that goes to a split decision versus a 5-round main event against Leon. I think that getting around that first one isn't going to be the obstacle, but convincing the computer and convincing the decision maker that there is a positive outcome coming out the other side. It's one of these unique spots. And I like it. I would like for this policy to be broken. So many times we will see at least veterans that we like, that we respect. We know how good they are. They're ranked very high. They're ranked very high for their age. Like there's nobody else in the top 5 that's 35 plus years old. Like this is somebody really special. But then we start to get them to play with other veterans. Okay, and here's an 8th ranked 38-year-old. So let's get these two together, because we're not going to put either one on a course for a title run again, but the fans still know who they are, and they still like it, and we're showing them their way out the door, and we got to give them something to do. And then you get the young up-and-comers with the better records, and even though they're not ranked as high, they got the potential to be as high or higher, and we're going to get them to play together. It turns into one of these situations where you can have an industry, and that's very sustainable, but it sure is fun when some of those policies get broken. And I don't know that anybody is better at the selling and the marketing than Colby. Colby has revolutionized it. Colby has done stuff that you have yet to identify. And I'll identify when he's retired, but he's done stuff that has changed the way you market and promote a fight. Are you aware of that? All right. Kevin Lee did it. Henry Cejudo did it. There's this very small group that saw from each other, started stealing ideas. But then like anything else that worked, they did not tell anybody. And I only tell you that because Ian Garry, not for nothing, he's very good. He just put out these hats over the weekend as a way of trolling Colby, and he switched it from red to blue. And instead of make America great again, he's going to make MMA great again. Ian Garry even said in his preview to sell this on his online store, buy one of these to upset Colby. I think he said piss him off. I mean, that's good stuff. That's more than most fighters do. And when you have one of these spots where the hard one to get it done is for Gary, he's the one that's got to take on somebody coming off an L, or he's the one that's got to take on an older fighter, or he's got to take on the guy that's more experienced. Like generally that's the one that's hard to get done. He takes his ball and he goes plays in a different part of the court. So you guys want to see the fight. If you had the power, you would make the fight. If I had the power, I would make the fight. But I also can see and identify what the problems are with it. And the reason I speak to how good Colby is at this is if he wants that fight to get done, he's going to get it done. It's going to be just as pleasing to watch how he goes about getting it done as it's going to be to watch the fight itself.